Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the public meeting for the draft remedial action plan amendment for the Midway Village Bayshore Park redevelopment. My name is Asha Sethi, and I'm a public participation specialist for the California Department of Toxic Substances Control. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We do hope that you're all staying safe and staying well during the pandemic. We would have liked to have been with you in person this evening and look forward to the opportunity to do so in the future. I'll be facilitating the public comment portion of this online webinar and encourage you to provide us with feedback. This meeting is being recorded. You've all entered in viewer mode with cameras and mics turned off. We do have Spanish, Chinese, and Arabic interpretation available for this meeting. Just look for the globe interpretation icon at the bottom of the screen, and you'll find the languages to select. Live transcription is turned on. If you'd like to turn it off, click on the CC icon at the bottom of the screen and click Hide Subtitle. Next slide, please. Next, I'll go over how to participate in this Zoom webinar. There's two ways you can participate. During the presentation, you can type a question by clicking on the Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen. We do have a lot of content to get through, so please bear with us, and we'll respond to them after the end of the presentation. We'll also take questions using the raise hand icon, which you can find at the bottom of the screen as well. When we call on you, you'll be able to unmute yourself at that time. For anyone calling in, there is a way to raise your hand and unmute yourself, and that's by dialing *9 to raise your hand. And then to unmute yourself, you'll have to dial *6 when you're called on. We'll alternate between phone callers, Q&As typed in, and those that have raised hands. My colleague, Jerry Dietrich, is available to provide us with tech support if needed. Could you say hi, Jerry?
Hi, everyone.
Thanks. In case you do encounter any technical difficulties, let's try and have patience with each other. We're all still learning, and if you're unfamiliar with using Zoom webinar, we'll do our best to assist you. Next slide, please. I'll go over our agenda next. I'd like to introduce you to the other DTSC staff that are part of today's meeting. First, we have Kim Walsh. Can you say hi, Kim?
Hi, everyone.
Thanks, Kim. She's the project manager for the site and also a unit chief for the site mitigation and restoration program in our Berkeley office. We also have Julie Pettijohn. Can you say hi, Julie?
Hey, y'all.
She's the branch chief for the site mitigation and restoration program, also in our Berkeley office. Julie will provide an overview of DTSC's mission and involve parties for this project. And then Kim will go over the site remediation process, a background for the project, the proposed remediation plan, next steps. And then we'll have time for public input, and we'll open it up to questions and comments. That's it for opening announcements, and now I'll turn it over to Julie.
Next slide, please. Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us. As Asha pointed out, and thank you, Asha, for the introduction. As Asha pointed out, I'm Julie Pettijohn. I'm the branch chief for the Berkeley office, Site Mitigation and Restoration Program. So what I have shown on the slide here, slide number 4, is our mission, which is quite a mouthful. What I can say is we're in the business of protecting public health and the environment. So the group that I work with, the project the group that is managing this project is the Site Mitigation and Restoration Program, but we have other folks in DTSC that assist us with enforcing hazardous waste laws, reducing hazardous waste generation, and finally we have a safer consumer products and also a lab that helps us out with chemically safer products. So next slide, please. So I did mention the Site Mitigation and Restoration Program. So we are responsible for evaluation and remediation of contaminated properties throughout the state of California. And the Berkeley office specifically focuses on Monterey County to the south, North to the Oregon border, coastal. So the Midway Village property is smack dab within the middle of that. I would say this is some of the most beautiful properties in the state of California. Next slide. Okay, so this slide goes over some of the roles and responsibilities. On the left side, you will see the DTSC staff that represent the team for the Midway Village property. You had the opportunity to meet Asha, and Kim will be up next. We also have a toxicologist, Dr. Mathrani, Dr. Wang, who's our engineer, and finally, professional geologist, Marika Hughes is also part of our team. And what I would say is that our responsibility as DTSC is as the state regulatory agency. So we are overseeing the redevelopment that's proposed for this property, both during the actual construction work that's going to be done, but then following construction, ensuring that the protective measures are health protective, and then actually watching those and making sure that the protective measures continue throughout time. On the right side of the slide, you will see the owner of the property, the project proponent, which is the Housing Authority of the County of San Mateo. That's quite a mouthful. So we often refer to them as HACSM. So if you hear us say HACSM, that's the Housing Authority, the property owner. And what I would say is that the property owner has contracted with a nonprofit housing developer, that's Midpen Housing. That's also shown on the right side of the slide. They will be building the proposed redevelopment. And finally, they are supported by a couple of different consultants, Langen and also Craig Communications. All righty, so moving right along to slide number 7. Here is where I'm going to kick it off to Kim, who will talk to you about the site location.
Thanks, Julie. Welcome, everybody. We appreciate you joining us tonight to learn about the Midway Village Bayshore Park soil gas remediation. The remediation project that I'll talk about tonight is being done to support a proposed redevelopment project. The redevelopment site is located at Midway Drive and Schwerin Street in Daly City. The site is immediately south of the PG&E Martin Service Center. The Midway Village site can be divided into Midway Village North and Midway Village South. Midway Village North is shown with blue shading on the figure. Midway Village South is shown in pink, and Bayshore Park is shown in green. Both Midway Village and Bayshore Park were remediated approximately 20 years ago. Both sites went through the entire process shown on this slide, and contaminated soil was remediated. The sites are going through this process again because there are plans to redevelop them. For the current project, Midpen completed additional site investigation. Based on the results of the new investigation, we've prepared a draft amendment to the Remedial Action Plan, or RAP, to address soil gas contamination. We're now in the public comment period for the RAP amendment and asking for your feedback on the proposed soil gas remedy. After we collect the public and stakeholder comments on the draft RAP amendment, we'll either revise or finalize the RAP amendment. We'll publish the response to comments when the RAP amendment is finalized. After the final RAP amendment is complete and we've approved design and implementation plans, remedy construction will start. After construction, Midpen will prepare a construction completion report that explains all the work that was performed under our oversight. The completion report will include things like the results of confirmation testing to show that the remedy works. There will be ongoing monitoring and maintenance to be sure the remedy is effective. So as I mentioned, the Midway Village and Bayshore Park sites have been remediated for soil contamination, and the sites are safe for their current use. Both sites are currently capped with clean soil, concrete, or asphalt to prevent people from being exposed to contamination. We inspect the caps every year to check for cracks or other problems. If maintenance is required, the Housing Authority or the City of Daly City performs the maintenance. Land use is restricted in the capped area through land use covenants recorded with the county. For example, restrictions allow residential use at Midway Village, but restrict digging that could interfere with the cap unless DTSC approves. On the Bayshore Park site, the restrictions prohibit residential use and digging that could interfere with the cap. Finally, every 5 years, we perform a comprehensive review of the soil remedy to evaluate if the remedy remains effective and identify any needed follow-up. This figure shows the areas with land use covenants. There are 3 land use covenants, and all are north of Midway Drive. The Midway Village land use covenants apply to the areas shown in orange and yellow. The Bayshore Park land use covenant area is shown in green. In all 3 of these restricted areas, digging or otherwise disturbing the caps is not allowed without DTSC approval. As I mentioned, the land use controls restrict using the Bayshore Park land for residential use. So we've talked about the current conditions at Midway Village and Bayshore Park. Now let's talk about the site background and history that got us to the current conditions. In about 1906, a manufactured gas plant, also known as an MGP, began operating on what is now the PG&E Martin Service Center site north of Midway Village. The plant used oil to produce gas for the lighting, cooking, and heating needs of the community. The plant operated until 1913, and it was dismantled in 1916. During World War II, the federal government acquired the properties that are now Midway Village, Bayshore Park, and the PG&E Martin Service Center. They constructed military housing for the Navy on the Midway Village and Bayshore Park sites. During the construction, the federal government filled the marsh areas of the sites with about 20,000 cubic yards of soil and concrete from the MGP site. The fill soil was contaminated with MGP waste that contained polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs. Modern environmental regulations didn't exist during World War II, and we've learned a lot about the toxicity of PAHs since that time. Beginning in 1955, the Housing Authority of the County of San Mateo acquired the site and operated the former military housing facility. The Housing Authority demolished the Navy housing in 1976 and built the current Midway Village housing. In 1977, the City of Daly City acquired the Bayshore Park property and built the park. Soil contamination was discovered at Midway Village in 1990. That same year, we oversaw the first soil removal as part of the Housing Authority's drainage improvement project. In 1991, we issued a remediation order, and later we added Bayshore Park to the order. By 1994, we had implemented a remedial action plan, or RAP, to remediate PAHs in soil. About 7 years later, we updated the RAP to make the PAH cleanup goal more than 10 times more stringent. We removed 2 to 5 feet of contaminated soil in areas of Midway Village and across Bayshore Park, and then capped these locations with soil or hardscape. Then we recorded the land use covenants to restrict the land use where contamination remained below the caps. Since the early 2000s, we've conducted annual inspections and a comprehensive review every 5 years. In 2018, the Housing Authority and MidPen asked for our oversight of their redevelopment project since contamination remained on site. Our role is to ensure that the community is protected from chemical exposure during the redevelopment and ensure that the new buildings are safe for occupancy. The redevelopment plan includes demolishing and replacing the existing housing. It also includes constructing a new park, childcare facility, community center, and property management office in new locations. This slide shows the future location of Bayshore Park along Schwerin Street. Redevelopment will be done in 5 phases. The redevelopment will start with phase 1 in the lower right corner of the site, where Bayshore Park is currently located. This will allow Midway Village residents to move into new housing on site and not be displaced during redevelopment. Phase 1 of the redevelopment plan requires changing the land use at the current Bayshore Park from recreational to residential use. The proposed change in land use on the park meant that we needed an updated health risk assessment so we could be sure that the redevelopment plan would be safe for future residents. MidPen began investigations in 2018 to support the updated risk assessment. The first investigation was a soil gas investigation of Bayshore Park and Midway Village. Soil gas is the air that collects between soil particles. At the same time as the soil gas investigation, we were doing a 5-year review of the current remedy at Midway Village and Bayshore Park. MidPen found volatile organic chemicals, VOCs, in soil gas that exceeded screening levels. They also found shallow groundwater in some locations during the soil gas sampling. Based on this new information, we requested that the county update the groundwater investigation. Groundwater is not a source of drinking water, and land use restrictions prevent groundwater use. But we've asked the county to confirm that groundwater is not carrying contamination offsite. That work is in progress. Based on soil gas results in our 5-year review, we required the Housing Authority to assess risks to current residents as well as future residents. The Housing Authority performed 2 rounds of air sampling below the foundations of the existing homes and 2 rounds of indoor air sampling to check the current conditions in homes at the site. We found that the soil and current foundations are still an effective barrier between chemicals in soil gas and indoor air in the existing buildings. The photo on this slide shows a Suma canister, the equipment used to collect an indoor air sample. After the indoor air study, MidPen conducted additional soil gas investigation in 2019 in Midway Village south of Midway Drive to find the limit of the soil gas contamination. MidPen used the soil gas results in a new health risk assessment. Under our oversight, they evaluated the risk, assuming future residential use of what is now Bayshore Park. We identified potential future risk if vapors in soil gas moved through the soil and building foundations and into indoor air. We concluded that the new development must include a remedy to prevent soil gas from entering indoor air of the new buildings. The Remedial Action Plan Amendment updates the 1993 RAP that was developed to address soil contamination. The RAP amendment focuses on addressing soil gas contamination and controlling soil vapor intrusion into new buildings. As I mentioned, the indoor air study completed in 2019 confirmed that the current residents are protected. The current foundations remain an effective barrier between chemicals in soil gas and indoor air. The draft RAP amendment explains why we're doing the remediation and identifies the remedial options. The RAP amendment proposes the best option to address soil gas contamination based on criteria that I'll talk about in a minute. The comment period is open now so the public can review the proposed remedial alternative for soil gas. The project team evaluated a range of alternatives to prevent soil gas from impacting indoor air quality after redevelopment. We're required to evaluate alternative 1, the no action alternative, as a baseline for comparison with the other alternatives. The other alternatives all include vapor mitigation systems, land use restrictions, and operation and maintenance of the remedy. Alternative 2 also includes soil vapor extraction. Alternatives 4A and 4B also include soil excavation. The difference between alternatives 4A and 4B is in how much soil would be removed. Alternative 4A would remove soil from areas that exceed soil gas remediation goals. Alternative 4B would focus only on the areas where residential building foundations would overlap with soil gas contamination. The RAP amendment evaluates the remedial alternatives for soil gas using the criteria established in federal regulations. The remedial alternatives are directly compared to one another using these criteria. The first two criteria are threshold criteria. The alternatives have to meet these two criteria. They must protect human health and the environment and comply with state and federal requirements. The remaining criteria are balancing and modifying criteria. These include how effective the remedy will be in the short and long term, if the remedy would treat and reduce contamination, how readily the cleanup can be implemented, and whether the community and other regulatory agencies approve of the proposed alternative. Using the 9 criteria, we compared these alternatives and proposed the best option. The proposed remedial alternative is alternative 3, which includes vapor mitigation systems under future buildings north of Midway Drive and land use controls. Although alternative 3 doesn't include excavation as part of the remedy, it's worth noting that about 2,300 cubic yards of contaminated soil would be removed under alternative 3, just in the normal course of development. Construction, for example, when utilities are installed, would result in removing some contamination. Alternative 2, which includes soil vapor extraction, was not proposed because the site has a high water table and clay fill, and these conditions make vapor extraction a less efficient and effective alternative. Alternatives 4A and 4B, which include soil excavation, were not proposed because they have several disadvantages. Large-scale excavation poses additional short-term risk to the community with more contaminated soil disturbance, higher potential for nuisance odors, and increased construction traffic. Since the site has contaminated soil rather than concentrated MGP waste, soil excavation may not be as effective for addressing soil gas. The cost of these alternatives are also more than twice the cost of the proposed alternative. So let's look a little closer at what's included in the proposed remedy. The first element is cap removal and replacement. Building demolition and surface grading for redevelopment would disturb the existing cap, covering remaining contamination. Portions of the cap that are disturbed will be replaced with an equivalent cap. The new buildings north of Midway Drive would include vapor mitigation systems. Those systems generally consist of subsurface piping to allow venting and a vapor barrier under the building foundations. The proposed remedy also requires a variance to the existing land use covenants. The variance is like a permit to do something different from what's required in the land use covenants, as long as it's still protective. The variance is required so the cap can be removed and replaced and to allow residential construction on Bayshore Park. After redevelopment, the land use covenants will be updated to require maintenance of the remedy and to allow residential use at what is now Bayshore Park. The variance and the new land use covenants will only allow residents to move in after the vapor mitigation systems have been installed, tested, and are operating successfully. An updated operation and maintenance plan will also be completed for the site. The plan will require annual inspections and 5-year reviews as long as the remedy is in place. Now let's talk about how the remediation and redevelopment would work. First, as I mentioned earlier, construction will be conducted in phases to avoid displacing current residents. The reddish-orange area on this figure is the first phase of construction. The second phase is shown in yellow and includes a new child care center. The blue area on the figure is the third phase, which includes a second parking garage next to Midway Drive. Phase 4 is shown in purple. The last phase, phase 5, will be the new Bayshore Park area next to Schwerin Street. The phase 5 construction will include grading and installing utilities to prepare the land for later development as a park. The Housing Authority will transfer the new park property to the City of Daly City, and the city will develop the park. At different times during the construction, soil would be removed from the site or brought to the site. Some contaminated soil would be removed as part of the redevelopment, such as when utilities are installed. In fact, 4 out of 5 of the redevelopment phases would include excavating and disposing of contaminated soil. During phase 1 of the redevelopment, the contractor would remove approximately 176 truckloads, more than 2,000 cubic yards, of contaminated soil, and that accounts for most of the contaminated soil that would be removed during the project. You can see that much smaller amounts of contaminated soil would be removed during later phases of construction, and no contaminated soil would be removed during phase 4 redevelopment, which is south of Midway Drive. Phases 1 and 2 would include importing more than 1,000 truckloads of clean soil, but that work would happen over a 4-year period. Phases 3, 4, and 5 will include removing clean soil from the site. This slide shows the phase 1 construction area in yellow and the proposed truck route that would be used to import and export soil from the site. Soil would be hauled away using the route shown with the blue arrows. Trucks bringing clean fill soil to the site would follow the route shown with red arrows. The City of Daly City would have to approve these routes before construction could start. Most of the truck trips would be hauling clean soil. That is, only about 195 truck trips will be hauling contaminated soil. The trucks will be covered and the truck tires will be cleaned before they leave the site. Before the proposed remediation can start, MidPen will prepare site-specific plans that explain the procedures they'll use to keep the community and workers safe and avoid environmental impacts. The plans will be included in a remedial design and implementation plan, or RDIP, for each phase of construction. We will review and comment on the RDIPs, and when our comments are resolved, we'll approve the plan. Each RDIP will include a community air monitoring plan, health and safety plan, dust and odor control plan, and other plans to protect the community and environment. Now let's look at some examples of the procedures that would be used to protect the community. An important part of protecting the community is controlling access to the construction areas. The work areas would be fenced off, and there would be signs explaining what the project is and who to contact for more information. There would be air monitoring stations placed around the site to make sure that dust isn't going off-site and into the neighborhood. Here you can see a typical air monitoring device, which would be used during the work. Water and other suppressants would be used to make sure that dust and odors aren't leaving the site. Trucks hauling soil to and from the site would be covered. There would be tire cleaning stations and rumble strips to make sure that dirt isn't being tracked out when the trucks leave the site. There would be workers with flags and signs to direct traffic. Now, once the community protection procedures are in place and the site has been graded, the workers would start building the remedy, including the vapor mitigation system. Vapor mitigation systems have been in use for radon and methane since the mid-1990s. So these systems are a proven technology. The vapor mitigation system would prevent soil vapor from entering indoor air. The system would include perforated pipes and a gravel layer below an engineered barrier, which would be below the foundation. The pipes would vent soil vapors before they could build up under the foundation. The vents are piped to the roof and open to the air above the building. This type of system is common in new developments around the Bay Area. The photos on this slide show the engineered barrier that can be either spray applied or rolled out in sheets that are welded together to seal the seams. After the barrier is in place, it's tested to be sure it's airtight. One way to do that is by using smoke to look for any air leaks. The vapor mitigation system would be required for all buildings north of Midway Drive, and there would be operation and maintenance requirements to ensure that the vapor mitigation system remains effective. During the project, there would be ongoing communication with the community. We would issue work notices to the community around the site, and copies of those notices go to other interested parties on our project mailing list. Our work notices include our contact information so the public can call us and ask questions. In addition, MidPen and the Housing Authority would be coordinating with the residents. We would prepare briefings to interested parties if requested. As I mentioned earlier, there would be signage on site, including on the construction fencing, and our contact information would be posted on those signs. Part of the remediation process is ensuring that the project complies with the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. We evaluate whether the work needed to perform the cleanup would have impacts on the environment. We started with the description of the proposed remediation alternative. Then we reviewed the CEQA assessment that the City of Daly City completed for the redevelopment in the Sustainable Communities Environmental Assessment, or SCEA. We concluded that the mitigation measures for the redevelopment would also prevent environmental impacts during the remediation. If the proposed remedy is approved, mitigation measures included in the SCEA will be adopted for the remediation. Using those mitigation measures, we would avoid significant environmental impacts. We prepared a statement of findings and a notice of determination explaining our CEQA analysis for the proposed remediation. Both documents are available for public review. The mitigation measures for the proposed remediation project include dust control, traffic control, proper management of contaminated soil and groundwater, and proper management of any hazardous building materials. So our next steps are to evaluate all the comments we receive either tonight or over the course of the public comment period. Then we'll consider if changes to the draft RAP amendment are needed based on the comments. We'll prepare a response to comments document that addresses each comment we receive. Our responses will explain if any changes to the RAP amendment were made because of comments received. After we've prepared the response to comments and made any changes, we would approve a final RAP amendment and finalize the CEQA documents. The RAP amendment can't be implemented without a variance to the existing land use covenants. Again, the variance is like a permit to do something different from what's required in the land use covenants, as long as it's still protective. The Housing Authority has applied for the variance, and there will be a public hearing for the variance request. The hearing will be an opportunity for parties with property rights to give testimony for the DTSC hearing officer to consider. The hearing will be open to the public so anyone can attend. We'll issue a public notice in the next few days that explains how to attend the hearing and how to submit written comments. Key dates in the construction schedule include the hearing for the land use covenant variance, which is scheduled for next month. If DTSC grants the variance and approves the implementation plan, then the next step will be for DTSC to send out a work notice, letting the community know when the first phase of work will be happening. We'll send out these work notices before each phase of construction. Phase 1 construction may start as early as this summer, but residents would not move in until the vapor mitigation system is in place, tested, and confirmed to be operating successfully. The redevelopment will continue for several years. I want to thank you all for your attention tonight. We've covered a lot of ground. Now I'm going to turn the presentation back over to Asha so she can tell you more about the public comment period and how you can participate. Asha?
Thank you so much for the presentation, Kim. That really was a lot of information to take in, and you'll soon have the opportunity to provide comment tonight. You can also send them to Kim through email, by mail, or by phone through the end of the comment period, which is Friday, April 30th. For comments that we receive after tonight's meeting, we'll acknowledge that we received your comment, but please bear with us until after the close of the comment period to receive a written response. And those comments will be combined in a response to comments document that becomes a part of the final remedial action plan. So next slide, please. If you'd like to access hard copies of any documents, you can visit the Midway Village Community Center on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 8 to 3. And that is open to the public since the local libraries are currently don't have access to reference section during the pandemic. And you can also access documents for Midway Village on our EnviroStore database. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you need assistance, and I can walk you through it or send you direct links to the documents. The next slide, please. Here's contact information for both Kim and I. Please feel free to get in touch with us anytime. We'd love to hear from you. If you have questions about the redevelopment effort itself, please contact Matt Lewis with MidPenn and Babs Defenderfer with the Housing Authority. That takes us to the end of our presentation. Next slide, please. And now I'd like to open it up for questions and comments. Just a reminder, you have two ways to participate. You can either click on the raise hand icon or use the Q&A feature. So I'll take a look and see if we've got anyone with their hands raised or if we've got any questions. Okay, it looks like Clara has her hand raised. If we could have Clara unmute herself so she can speak, that would be great.
Hello.
Hi, Clara. Nice to hear your voice. Thanks for joining us.
It's nice to be here. Thank you. And I wanted to ask, in the presentation, you said that there would be a cap of the type that's already being used under current buildings, and that there would be a new cap, but it would be the same as the old one. And I wondered why you wouldn't have a better cap, or whatever the state of the art is, since it's been a while since that previous cap was built. I had some other questions.
Okay, do you want to let's have Kim respond to that first question to start with.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Hi, Clara. Thank you for the question.
Hi.
So the cap that would be replaced is similar to other caps that are used in remediation on other sites. So the technology for the cap hasn't changed in the way that the technology has changed for evaluating soil gas and vapor intrusion. Does that answer your question?
Did we lose you, Clara? Could you please unmute Clara so she can do a follow-up?
It did in part answer my question. I just wondered that if it wouldn't be a good idea to kind of have, I always think about redundant systems, perhaps some additional, the type of item that's placed under the foundation. If there is if there's any improvement that would make that function better, that's why I asked previously.
So the new buildings would have a vapor barrier that doesn't exist on the current buildings. So in that sense, it's an improvement to the property in the redevelopment.
Claire, would you like Kim to bring up that vapor barrier slide to go over it? Did you want a refresh on what that system would look like?
Or is it more the cap that you're asking about?
I think that I'll review it in the draft amendment, and then if I have more questions, I'll send them in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I did have more questions.
Go ahead, Claire.
How certain does your investigation make you about the direction of the groundwater? Because this area is uphill from, or at least I believe it's uphill from Bayshore Boulevard. And I understood, and perhaps I was wrong in my understanding, but that the drainage, it goes through the Levinson Marsh, and then it goes through the Brick Arch Sewer, it goes under Bayshore Boulevard, then it flows into the area that is part of the Baylands and located in Brisbane. And I'm concerned about that because I'm concerned about how contaminated the water is that's flowing through the whole system that ends up in the bay. And I wanted to ask you about that. And I did understand your investigations of the groundwater that may be going off site are not complete. And that I'm very interested in that and wonder why you went ahead now without having that information, and how, if there's any possibility that you'd need to change both the development and your amendment if you find that there is off-site contaminated water.
Yes, so the previous investigations that were done at Midway Village and Bayshore Park didn't identify contaminated groundwater transport offsite as an issue of concern. The reason that we are looking at it now is because we found groundwater shallower than we understood from the previous investigations. So I would characterize what we're doing now as out of an abundance of caution. We're pretty hopeful that because of the characteristics of the contamination, that the potential for offsite transport via groundwater to surface water is pretty low. But at the same time, we thought it was important to evaluate that pathway and make sure that we completely evaluated that.
Does that answer your question, Clara, or do you have a follow-up on that?
I wanted to ask if there would be ongoing monitoring of that possibility by monitoring the groundwater near the, I guess, the edge of the property.
Yeah, so right now we're reviewing the results of the groundwater investigation that we requested the county to perform. And after we've had a chance to review it and the investigation report is final, any appropriate recommendations that come out of that, the county would be responsible for implementing them. So in other words, if we review the results and we find that it's appropriate to do monitoring, then the county would implement that.
And Kim, could you explain why we asked the county for this report in particular, how it came about?
Yeah, so during the soil gas investigation, so we did the soil gas investigation because we needed to evaluate the risk of putting housing on Bayshore Park where housing hasn't existed before. And as part of that risk assessment, we did the soil gas investigation. And in the soil gas investigation, we found groundwater just below the surface, maybe a couple of feet below the ground surface. So that was new information for us. We hadn't seen that in the project record. And so we knew that the groundwater was potentially in contact with the MGP contamination. And so we wanted to evaluate it and make sure that we were addressing both the pathway that Clara was talking about and make sure that there weren't any implications for the redevelopment or the people that are on the site right now.
My follow-up to that would be, is the county hiring an environmental firm to make this investigation? And if they're not, then isn't that a conflict of interest since they own the property? If they have, I just want to know if it's county employees or if they are hiring an independent company.
Right. So you might remember from the beginning in the roles and responsibilities discussion that Julie gave. She mentioned that the county has consultants that are working for them, and any of this work that the county is doing, they're doing it under our oversight as well.
Thank you. That helps with that question. I do have two more questions and then I'm done.
Okay, we have time, so go ahead and ask. And then I know that LaDonna's been patiently waiting, so we'll get to you next, LaDonna.
The tenants who have occupied Midway Village have been very vocal and persistent in their allegations of harm that has come to them based on their living there. And yet you're saying that your testing showed that there weren't any VOCs entering their units. And that's, if that isn't how they were exposed, then how were they exposed? It seems like a kind of a mystery. If everything was working fine, why was there allegations of various kinds of harm?
Well, I'm not quite sure what all the allegations were.
Clara, are you speaking about, I'm sorry to interrupt, Kim.
Go ahead.
Clara, are you speaking about prior to the remediation efforts, or yeah, what time frame, I'm curious, are you referring to?
Well, I haven't heard it, to be honest with you, in the last few years, but I would say 10 years ago. I'm not sure about the last remediation. It seemed like it was still going on. It was still, these were things that you read in the paper about kind of the desperation of the people who live there. But I'm not sure of the exact years, so I can't answer your question. But it hasn't been recently that I've heard about it.
And did you have, sorry, Kim, I'm sorry I cut you off, but you were in the middle of responding.
Sorry, I was just checking to make sure I wasn't on mute again.
Okay.
Clara, I can tell you that the current conditions on the site are safe for the residents at Midway Village. And the soil remediation that was done, it was completed in 2002. That remediation remains protective. So I'm not quite sure how to address concerns that come that are based on a time period prior to when DTSC got involved with the site. We first got involved with the site in 1990.
And did you have a follow-up? You said you had two questions, Clara. Was there a follow-up? Is that related to this topic or something separate?
Something separate.
Okay.
Thank you for that response. I appreciate it. And the last question is, with relation to all the truck trips, this location is located across the street, or let's say 2 streets from San Francisco, and it's located very close to Brisbane. So when you talk about the city of Daly City is going to try to figure out what the best route is. I wonder if they're going to be consulting with San Francisco and Brisbane, because the trucks will have to go through either one of those cities before they get to 101. And it can be a big issue depending on the traffic and what else is going on. So is that the plan for them to consult, or are they not being required to do that?
That's a good question, Claire. I don't know the answer to that, but we could certainly follow up with MidPen and the Housing Authority on that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you, Clara.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you so much for being patient with us, LaDonna. If we could unmute LaDonna.
Yes, good evening.
Hi, LaDonna. Nice to hear your voice. Welcome.
Hi,
Thanks
Asha.
for joining us.
I wanted to say thank you for, inviting me and giving me notice about this meeting.
Absolutely.
Midway Village is very important. This is my former community, actually.
Mhm.
And so I have several questions, so please bear with me.
Mhm.
Kim, hello, Kim.
Hello.
I had a number of questions for you. You mentioned that the current conditions are safe there at Midway for the residents. So it sounds like you have a lot of confidence that conditions are safe. However, during your presentation, you mentioned that there is no vapor barrier that exists currently,
That's
but
right.
you guys will be implementing one later on, which tells me all of this time, then the residents have been exposed to vapor intrusion, correct?
No, actually what's happening is there's new development that's being placed on Bayshore Park. So there's going to be housing in an area that hasn't been developed with housing before. So that's one point. The other.
Well, wait a minute. Wait, you mentioned
Mhm.
There's going to be housing built on the park. So we get it. Right now, there's no housing there. And
Right.
in the past, and maybe currently, I don't know if it's blocked off because I haven't been there, in the last several years, but that's the area where the school children used to be able to go play and do their physical ed requirements. I'm talking about the current housing as it exists right now, since there are no barriers in
Right.
place. Are not the residents being currently exposed until you make these proposed changes?
No, I mean, we did do an indoor air study. So we collected samples from beneath the foundations, from the air beneath the foundations and in the indoor air. And we didn't find that soil vapor was moving through the soil and foundation into the homes.
Okay,
the
so there was
question-
a study that was done, and it's difficult to find. We have the hard copies, but they removed them off of ATSDR site. And it in fact did do a health study. And that was going to be my other question. When was the last time a human health study has been done on the residents? There was documentation that showed there was contaminants being drawn not only up under the units, but from outside into the units through their, I guess through their, what do you call the heater system. So, and then there were pictures actually taken in different residents' apartments where they actually had vegetation or weeds growing in cracks that were literally coming up through their floorboards and alongside the walls. So we know that there are, you know, some elements getting into the places, but many residents were also complaining of breathing problems and breathing issues that were going on. And so I guess my question is, when was the last time there has been a health study? And Ms. Clara, thank you for your questions. She mentioned that she hasn't heard of complaints lately, but she did know that they were adamant about health concerns in the past. But we also know several of the residents has passed away. And several of those residents were the main ones that were complaining because they knew of the historic and the current contamination. So has there been any research? I know you guys have spent lots of money in this redevelopment plan and, you know, sitting here confidently claiming there's no contamination. Well, no, you're not saying there's no contamination. What you said is you're confident that the residents are safe. However, you admit that there is contamination underneath the homes and that there has been, I guess, some sort of remediation, which is what, the 2 feet or 5 feet of concrete that is supposed to be this barrier, yet folks can't plant gardens currently either. And so the issue that I have is you've got this fantastic plan to remediate and keep low income, disadvantaged people on a toxic dump. And there is no one saying, is this human to keep people living on a toxic dump site that is next to Pacific Gas and Electric Company, where these PNA's levels have been tested at like 500,000 ppms in certain areas? Is there anyone amongst you all that are in this decision-making position that will say, you know, something's not right here? And our mission says we're to protect human health. We are about protecting the public, yet you're okay with going ahead with the development, building on a toxic dump site that has historically been contaminated. You've got residents who've lived there for years that have passed away, and that isn't raising any concerns, any level of concerns within you people. And my last comment is going to be, would any of you, Kim and others, the toxicologists, the geologists, the new folks that are coming in building, are any of you going to live on this site with you and your families?
So what I can say is that the work that we're doing to evaluate the site and the safety of the plans for the redevelopment, we're doing that so that that site is safe for anyone to live there.
Which didn't answer any of my
anyone.
concerns, but you said that the redevelopment is safe, but has there been any studies or any efforts to connect with the residents and see what their current health status is?
Well, so what we did do was an indoor air study and an evaluation of the concentrations underneath the buildings.
When was that done?
That was done recently. That was 2019.
And who conducted that study?
That was done by a consulting firm hired by the county, by the housing authority, under our oversight.
Do you know their names?
The consulting firm?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's Langan.
How do you,
And
how do you
they're
spell that?
Langan.
Okay.
And they're included on one of the opening slides. If you got a copy of the slide deck from tonight.
Okay. And so the results of their study is listed online?
Yeah, it's posted on EnviroStore. The reports are final. We also provided summaries of the information to the residents. We met with the residents whose homes were sampled and sat down and talked with them about the results. And then we provided a written letter to them with the data so that they would have that directly. But it's also available for any member of the public to look at on EnviroStore.
I can provide you with a link to those documents, LaDonna.
Okay. Do you
I
know
was
how many homes were tested?
I don't have that information in front of me.
We'll get that information to you.
Yeah.
Mhm,
But I was
okay.
thinking,
Several. I'll say several.
You'll say several, but you don't know the amount, the number amount, correct?
Yeah, I don't remember it off the top of my head, and I would hate to give you inaccurate information.
Oh yeah, no, I don't want you to do that, not at all.
And then
and LaDonna, I was thinking maybe we could circle back to one of the questions you had earlier about redeveloping on contaminated sites. Maybe
Mhm.
Julie, if you could speak to sort of the bigger picture. Oh, we see your hand, Julie.
Sorry.
No problem.
Apologies. I'm still kind of a Zoom newbie. Yeah,
We
so
all are. And specifically, Julie, if you could speak to just manufactured gas plant sites and their prevalence and redevelopment in those areas. I mean, I know we have a site in San Francisco, in the Marina District. There's a variety of different other sites. So.
Yeah, we work on a number of former manufactured gas plant sites, as Asha has indicated. San Francisco, they're all over the place. I mean, if you think about before there was electricity in buildings, that was the way that people got lighting and heating into their homes is that you took gas and had oil, and unfortunately there was a byproduct. It used to be perfectly legal before modern environmental laws to pretty much do anything with these wastes. It's an unfortunate thing. But what I can tell you is that we work on a number of redevelopment projects all over the Berkeley regional area. So that's Monterey County north to the Oregon border coastal. We also have plenty of other properties that DTSC, other departments work on that are redevelopment properties. And by and large, no property is essentially pristine. So that's why we go to great lengths to, investigate the site, look at the past history, look for contamination, come up with a remedy that, and maybe it's a combination of remedies, that's not uncommon, so that we can be certain that once the redevelopment occurs, that not only during the redevelopment process, the construction, that down the road, that the future land users, and that could be just about anything, that those folks will be safe.
Right, and I appreciate that, but I noticed you mentioned Berkeley. However, majority of these remediated sites or contaminated sites, they also house low-income minorities, particularly African Americans, in these areas and on these sites. And that is a historic fact. So I know on your end, when you guys look at it, it's sort of normal, as you mentioned, they're all over the place. And at one point they're legal, because here in Vallejo, we're dealing with the same exact thing, where it was PG&E's former manufacturing gas plant that is located right next to low-income housing with young children, and you're finding the same health abnormalities there that you found in Midway, and Treasure Island and parts of Hunters Point and Sunnydale and Potrel Hill. These are all areas where there is largely disadvantaged, low-income minority populations. And that is the problem. That is that it has been an acceptable practice to allow the most vulnerable to live on a contaminated dump site. And at what point do folks in charge say, you know what, we have to do something different? It's like what we're seeing played out on national television now with policing, particularly against African Americans. It has been an accepted practice that is a genocide of a population of people because of their racial background or their racial makeup, being minorities. It's the same thing that is in housing. It's just a different product, but they both equal genocide. At what point do we push the envelope and say that it is not acceptable to allow people, the most vulnerable, to live on a toxic dump, and we go about our lives like everything is okay?
Yeah, LaDonna, yeah, we hear you, and we are working on expanding our reach a bit. There is a new funding initiative, and I don't know the details. We'll make sure you're connected to that effort to make sure that we are able to connect with communities and areas where there's not even redevelopment efforts happening. I don't know if that's anything you can speak to right now, Julie, but I know that we will be sharing information. There are going to be opportunities for public input on how to spend that money. And so I will make sure that you are added to that list so that you can get involved, because you're absolutely right. It's something agencies need to do better.
Right. And will the public's input actually be taken, or is it just a process to give public comment and then it's ignored and agency goes on and do what they're planning on doing anyway?
Well,
I mean, at some point, folks cannot think that it's okay to continue to build housing on toxic dump sites that shorten the lifespan of those that are forced to live there because economically they can't move, so they're stuck.
Well, and that's what we want to hear from you. And that now it's a different DTSC with different secretary, different management. We've got our Office of Environmental Equity with Ana Mascareñas leading that. And so it's really DTSC is, trying to do what we can and expand our reach so that we can do better. So, and that's what we need your voice to participate, because I think you will be able to move things in the direction that you'd like to see. So we'll make sure to include you, Donna.
Well, I'm hoping, that it really is a new, direction for DTSC, but I'm kind of disappointed to hear that your site chief thinks that Midway Village is safe, and there's no updated information on the health of the community, or even looking historically and see how many people have actually passed away that have been these longtime residents. So I'll stop there because I know we got to stop at 8, but thank you for taking my comment.
Thanks so much, LaDonna. And that ATSDR study that you mentioned, you said did you mention you have a hard copy of it, or you were looking for an electronic version? That's something that maybe we can look into for you. Oh, I think we lost you. Okay, I'll follow up with you about that later, LaDonna. And it looks like we've got Lonnie. Thank you so much for being patient. You're next.
Hi, good evening. Hi, my name is Lonnie. I'm from the Baby Hunters Point. I represent First Generation Environmental Health and Economic Development.
Yeah.
Yes. One of the things is I knew someone who worked over in that unit, and I was fully aware of what was going on and what was happening in that area. He told me about some things that he was afraid of. He said it was very dangerous, and he didn't pretty much like working in that area. But another thing, the talk that I'm hearing now is the same talk that I'm hearing when I was sitting on the Restoration Advisory Board for the shipyard. The same exact answers. And they said the same thing. Oh, it's safe, and we did this test, we did that test, and look what's going on now. There's an issue. It's a problem. One of the things I wanted to ask, I'm sorry I forgot the young lady's name who was actually talking. If she could provide the data as far as statistical data when it comes to those residents that you actually went and did ransom tests, how long have they been living in that community? Have they been there a year, 2 years? I would like to know the statistical data on that, to see how long those actual residents, have been living, on that premises, because it would have been good if you could have done some testing, at least with individuals who've been living there 15, 20 years, who weren't able to leave, as Ms. LaDonna Williams was saying, these individuals are poor and they have no way of being able to find other means of or other areas to live because of their situation. This is a disadvantaged community. So it's important that we can assist those individuals who are there, who are not feeling well. I'm wondering how many tenants have you actually talked to who said, I'm talking about long-term tenants, because I know there's some type of respiratory problem, because in the past, back in the 90s, when there were a lot of protests going on, back in 1991 through I think 2008, something like that, 2009. It was for a long time, long time. There were some issues, there were some problems, and so I'm kind of concerned to some of the things that she was saying, because it just doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound right, and so if she could provide that that data, that information for me, I would appreciate that, because I would like to know how long all of those tenants that they tested, how long have they been there? Thank you.
Thanks, Lonnie. Kim, do you want to speak to how those residences were selected for the indoor air sampling?
Yeah. So first I want to be sure, something that Lonnie mentioned was making me think that there might be some confusion about the type of study that we did. Our study was not a study of the health of the current residents at Midway Village. It was sampling the indoor air and sampling underneath the buildings and looking at whether VOCs could be getting from underneath the building and into the indoor air. So we didn't perform a health assessment. We're not doctors or nurses. We're scientists and engineers. And so we were gathering information to make sure that that pathway of vapors moving into indoor air wasn't complete, that there wasn't exposure there. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear. Was there another question, Asha, that I missed?
It sounded to me, Lonnie was curious about how those residences were selected. How did we decide which ones would be sampled?
Right. So we used the soil gas data that was collected before the indoor air study to try to identify areas that we should target. We were looking for the most likely areas where there might be vapors moving into indoor air. So that was one criteria for selecting where we sampled. Another criteria was that we just wanted to get a good cross section of the current residences. So we wanted to have good spatial coverage over the Midway Village development.
Does that answer your question, Lonnie? Or maybe we could follow up. We could provide.
Not really, because here's the issue. I understand that you went down to collect that sampling, right? But for them, it's kind of heinous for them not to check on the people that live there, to ask them, to reach out to them, have they had any health problems or health issues? What was the purpose? I understand that you had to find out, you had to go through that process. I don't particularly like the people that you choose. I think it should have been people from the community in control, and they set the narrative, not anyone else, because this is their health. Consultants that are hired by PG&E, right, or whoever they select, they're going to make sure they provide them the data that they want. PG&E has been in many situations in the past. And I'm going to say that because I used to work for PG&E. So I'm very aware of some of the things that they've done in the past. And they're still doing the same thing. Nothing different. To not be concerned about the people's health, that's uno numero. That's uno numero. That should be the main focus. And on top of that, when it comes to the them testing and sampling, the soil. So I just think that I'm a little out of breath here, walking up the stairs, got to work out. I'm sorry. I just think that that it should be more tests on that, when it comes to people's health. Let's find out how these individuals are feeling in this community and how long they've been living there and what kind of problems have they had in the past and present. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Lonnie. I appreciate it. Next, we have, let's see, a number here waiting patiently, ending in 522.
Hi, it's probably Pat Dodson.
Oh, hi, Pat. How are you? Nice to hear your voice.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you.
Good. Hello to
Thanks
all
for
of you.
joining us.
Yeah, I was not on the list, but someone told me about this.
Oh,
I
I'm
guess
glad that
I
you
am
got word.
invisible. Yes. I am invisible, but I got
will
on
add
anyway.
you to our list. I'm sorry,
Okay.
I will add you.
Okay. Now, I have noticed that Miss LaDonna Williams had brought up some questions that you can't answer. And I see the hesitancy of the people when she asked, would you move you or your families there? Or would you put new people that are relatives of yours in that site? I heard no answer. I heard interruptions from something else. That says a lot. You don't mind hurting other people as long as it's not you. That's bad. That's really bad. I don't know how long you plan to put people on this site again. I hope you change your mind and make sure it is safe. We have a similar site in Vallejo that the PG&E people are out here now or sometime soon trying to mitigate soil contamination from years ago. And it's been buried under the cement. I don't know what they're going to do because it's been there almost 100 years. So I'm guessing that the same kind of problem exists in this other land area. I'm hoping that you can clean it up, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be. I just hope that the developers and the engineers make sure it's clean or change their mind and do something else with the property where human life is not at stake. That's what I'm asking. We have enough people sick already. Please don't add to it. Use the property It may be worth a lot of money. Please use it some other way if there are health issues still and you can't answer them. And the biggest thing that you said, the quietness of would you move you or your family in that place? Not a peep. It was very quiet. Thank you very much. I'm through.
Thank you for your comments, Pat. Did you want to speak to that, Kim?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say that the work that we're doing, that I'm doing, is to make this development safe for anyone to move in.
Thanks, Kim.
Oh,
Julie,
and
did you
I just wanted to
wanna
jump
add?
in. So just to echo Kim, yes, it's for anyone, you, me, your neighbor, whomever. So if we weren't clear on that, to the question that was asked, I do want to be clear on that it's to make it safe for anyone.
Thanks, Julie. We do have a question. It's from Teresa. She asks, what plan will the developer choose to be able to go with when it comes to health and safety for the Midway residents when it's redeveloped?
So I'm a little bit unclear on the question. Is it which alternative is proposed for the redevelopment?
Teresa, would you be willing to raise your hand and we can unmute you if you want to clarify your question there? Okay, great. Teresa has her hand raised. Okay, Teresa.
Hello, hi everyone.
Hi, Teresa. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, so I'm hearing everybody's concerned and they're all valid and concern from another human being to another human being and not being selfishly and hearing concerns of, you know, of residents that have been around, that know, you know, the history and of what's going on. I used to work there at Midway 2021, no, 2011. That's when I start working there for a child development. They're right on Midway site. My question is, the developer will be able to, what plan is he going to? Because I heard that you guys do some testing from the inside and the outside, comparing if it's safer from indoor, if this is going to be layered or covered. My question is, I remember hearing that there will be able to, the developer have two options, option one and the second option. Which option do you think the developer will go for? And which one is he? I'm sure he's going to go for the cheaper option.
So Teresa, thank you for your question. The proposed option is to do the vapor mitigation system and land use controls. So the vapor mitigation system is a system of piping in a gravel layer underneath the new buildings with an engineered barrier above that. And then the foundation is built on top of that. So it's to block any vapors from moving from the soil into indoor air in the buildings.
Is that the only option? Is that the only way they're going to go for?
Well, that
And
was
is that going to be 100% safe?
So before anyone could move into the buildings, the vapor mitigation system has to be tested. And we have to make sure that there are no leaks in that barrier. And once it's tested, then people could move in, but not before, not before we're sure it's working.
So what happened if it's not sure?
If it's not working, people can't move in.
But it's already developed.
We would have to go back to the drawing board and make it safe. So there would have to be another engineering solution to make sure that it's safe before anybody can move in there.
And what's the timeline from that time to the time the people moving back inside?
Are you asking what's the time frame between finishing?
If there's suspected leakage, or if it's not working, how do we know that it's actually safe? How does, or the developers just gonna rush their way through just to move people in?
So before people could be moved in, there has to be a report of all of the construction that's done, including the vapor mitigation system and the testing of that system. That report has to be reviewed by us, and we have to be satisfied that that work was completed correctly.
Okay.
And at that point, then we could approve that, and only after that point could people move in.
And all those are going to be transparency to the community and the residents.
Yeah, any report like that we review gets posted on EnviroStore, and anybody from the public can review it. And they can see what was actually done, what the test results were, and that we have approved it and we think it's ready to move forward.
Yeah, but see, I don't get it. Why would they develop if you guys are already contacting, already putting that in I'm running out of words over here. If you guys are already making that happen, why would there be any leakage at all?
Oh, well, we don't expect it to fail, but things have to be tested. I mean, the remedy has to be tested before we would allow anyone to move in there.
Okay, so that's your time frame and that's your timeline. Okay.
And Teresa, there'd be ongoing inspections, and basically we'll have oversight for, but there's no end in sight, really. We're just out there every year, every 5 years, there's a report. We look at the remedy, see if there's any deficiencies. So there's going to be continued opportunities for public involvement. Julie, I see you came on. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say that when these systems are put in, we also have staff that are out there observing, taking lots of photos, answering, asking tough questions. So the ability for shortcuts is greatly diminished based on that. So we're watching it from the moment that they start with putting the system in, all the way through full, they put the building up, and we're also there when they're doing the indoor air work. We're there when they're doing, any subsequent sampling, so that we know that they're doing a good job, and that we can feel confident that we can allow for occupancy and that the system is working correctly.
Thank you so much.
When is your next test for the Midway, since you guys did one for 2019?
So we did 2 rounds of indoor air testing during that study, and we didn't find any indications that there was any vapor intrusion from the subsurface into the indoor air. And that was consistent with some early studies that were done many years ago. So we don't have plans to continue to do indoor air testing for the existing buildings. I will say that if the proposed remedy is approved and the variance is issued, the redevelopment will start as early as this summer. So the idea is to be building new housing for the folks that are living there, and the existing housing will be demolished.
What percentage of the whole Midway area that you guys did this test at? I don't remember seeing you guys over there at all.
Well, we were out there in 2018 and 2019 for
And
the testing.
do you guys have those the areas that you guys covered on
Mhm.
your slides?
Yeah, we'll make sure to send you that information, Teresa. I believe you're on our mailing list, right? You're on our email list.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll make sure that we get that information to you so you can see, where the sampling was done. And I lost my thought there. Kim, were you going to say something? Getting dark in my house here.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Teresa, for your comments. Really appreciate it and appreciate everyone's feedback. Thank you so much for spending the evening with us. This is not your last opportunity to provide us with feedback. As far as the formal public comment period goes, it's through April 30th. So please don't hesitate to reach out to Kim or I. We'd love to hear from you. And even after the public comment period, we're still here. We still want to hear from you. So don't see that as a cutoff. We want to hear, any feedback you have, and we're going to stay connected with you. We'll be sending work notices for each phase of work after, if and when the RAP is approved. So we're in it for the long haul. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.